When does one register that one is a woman? I wonder. Does she become a woman when she becomes responsible? Does she become a woman when she falls in love? Does she become a woman from a girl to a woman when she goes through pain? When is it difficult for her?
This week, I've been writing a lot about womanhood and what it means to be woman. And I think it's mostly because my birthday is coming up very soon as well. I'm turning 21 in just over a week. And the age I'm turning is 8 years from the age my mother had me. And I think I've been doing a lot of more reflection because there's this really famous quote that goes, womanhood is understanding your mother, and not just that, but also this lack of fear of turning 21. For a huge amount of my life, I've been scared of getting older. Not because I'm realizing it's not because I was scared of the age now, but rather because I was scared of what womanhood was and what it contained. And I think that just gave me this idea in which I saw womanhood as something that lacked self or demands the loss of yourself. And I think that terrified me, but that's essentially what I'm exploring in this video. But if you're new here, hi, I'm Sharon, and this is Sharon Unfiltered, where I explore media, politics, fashion, everything in between. This week's title is Womanhood Demands a Lack of Self, or What is Womanhood if not Loss of Self? And like I said earlier, I was really prompted into this because I am turning 21, but I think a huge amount of my fear around going into my 20s and my early 20s was this idea of not being able to deny the identity of woman. And from what was socialized in society, at least from what I've been socialized in both Nigerian and Western society, everything I've learned about womanhood lacks the idea of self. We're taught womanhood is daughter, sister, wife, mother, and other. Everything other to us, but there's no self in that identity. And I think that essentially terrified me, at least. I don't know if it terrified a lot of other people, but going to your 20s means you cannot deny that you're not a woman anymore, because at that age, you sort of have to identify as a woman. Because like, I feel like there's a time or age hold on women. You can't say you're a teenager anymore, you can't say you're a girl anymore, but you're essentially thrusted into womanhood. And I guess I really just want to explore that in this video. And a lot of this thinking was also prompted by Reka, who's a fabulous Bollywood actress, and her interview in which When Do We Become Women? And I just want to quote Reka again, in which she says, when does one become woman? Does she become a woman when she's responsible, or when she falls in love? Or does she go from girl to woman when she goes through pain? And I really wanted to link the idea of pain into womanhood, in a sense, where does one become a woman when she first starts acknowledging that the idea of being a woman is painful. And in an incredibly patriarchal world and incredibly capitalistic world, both things combined, the idea of woman is so stifling and threatening in an instance to your idea of self, essentially. And something that I've been thinking about a lot is a lot of us are socialized, at least I was in Nigerian society, that you become a woman when you first bleed. But when I first bled when I was 12, I didn't feel like a woman. I felt terrified, afraid, and petrified. I'd been taught what a period was, but I was still terrified that I was now just bleeding, which I thought was this endless thing that would never stop, essentially. Which is funny now, but it really wasn't funny when I was 12. But also this idea of that I kind of have to bleed for the rest of my life because that's just what woman does. And there's not really a solution to this. That it's such a blessing to be able to bleed because it means you'll be able to nurture and have kids. That's how it was positioned to me as. And I think that early instance of me thinking womanhood was when I bled made me see society as kind of violent, in which society's definition of womanhood is biological and violent rather than emotional and chosen. That you don't choose when you become a woman, it's thrusted and pushed on you. You bleed now because your body says you're ready, but my body feels alien to me. And as a teenager, I think that is the time your body feels the most alien to you because obviously you're going through so many changes. I guess essentially growing pains, because a lot of people talk about growing pains when you're teething as a kid, but not really when you're as a teenager or when you're basically in the process of becoming. And you go through these hormonal changes, and all of these things are pushed on you. You have no choice because your body is just doing what the body does essentially, and it seems that your body chooses your identity rather than you choosing who you are meant to be or who you want to be. But another quote that's really prompted this thinking is a quote: "Womanhood is understanding your mother." And in this instance, womanhood is also generational. And I really do think this quote is true, more true than ever. I remember being a teenager and having screaming and hissy fits with my mom. And a lot of people see me and my mom's relationship and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys get along so well. For context, I am an only child. But as a teenager, it was stifling. I think because we came through two different perspectives, I don't think I was a woman until I turned, tw- not even 20. I think this idea of me finally becoming a woman has happened in the last year or so. But being a teenager and my mom identified as a woman, it was kind of stifling our relationship because we came from two different perspectives. And I think there was a lot of anger and resentment from my perspective, and there was a lot of discomfort and misunderstanding from her perspective because where'd her adorable little kid go and why is she shouting at me? As an adult, it's really interesting now. We really do laugh about it now because it's like, wow. Like, but I think we've both grown as people. As someone who lived in an African household, it's really common for your parents never to apologize. And it's something that I just was uncomfortable with. And I think that was one of the root causes of so many of our arguments. Because I've always been taught to apologize and be respectful to my elders. But it's like, why can't you be respectful and apologize to me also? And I think in the way I before used to communicate, that was through shouting and screaming and hissing. And I've been able to, like, I guess it's the word calm down. I don't think I was ever an angry person because no one ever sees me as an angry person. But when you're pushed into a corner where you feel like you're not listened to, it does feel stifling. And I think we've both been as people. My mom is someone that always apologizes now. It's very much a more clear relationship in which, or mutual relationship where we both have respect and understanding for each other. But I think when I was younger, I did hold a lot of resentment. Now, as an adult, I sometimes look in the mirror. Mind you, me and my mom look nothing alike. Like, she's fair skinned, I'm obviously more of a deeper tone. And like, I will look in the mirror and I sometimes just see her. And sometimes she'll look at me and I think she sees me too, because like she'll stare at me for really, really long. I should be standing in the corner of my room when I come back from like uni, because I live, like, if you can't tell, like I live in a studio apartment. So like I'm not like in my home city for uni, but essentially that. But in understanding, in turning 20 or entering my 20s, not when I turned 20, 'cause I don't think that was when I fully understood her, but I think it was a process of slowly growing older and older. And finally, I could sort of understand my mother, and I was like, oh shit, life is so shit. And yeah, that explains like so much to me. I think obviously a communication style could have been better, please. But like I do think there is very much better understanding now. Like there's this really, I don't know, because growing up in an African household, you just be asked to do stuff like, you know, like your mom would go to work and be like, oh, can you take this meat out the freezer or something like that? And obviously you forget to do that. You go to an 8 hour shift, you come back, your child hasn't taken the meat out the freezer. Do you know what a vex that is? As a teenager, as a kid, I didn't get it because I obviously didn't have a job. As an adult, that's done 8, 16 hour shifts. Guys, I get it. I get it. That shit is not funny. That shit is not funny. But I will say, I think through life experience, I think sometimes this is gonna sound so ageist, but sometimes the only way to truly understand somebody that is older is true life experience and having to go through something similar. And then you kind of have mirror perspective where it's like, I see you, I understand you. And I think that is a process of from girlhood to teenagehood to becoming a woman. I think it's kind of, you kind of have to go through those stages essentially and not rush it either. Because just because it happened, this clarity has happened for me like just before I'm 21 doesn't mean it has to happen for everyone before that, if that makes sense. Or it can happen before or it can happen after. You can't really use other people's times of clarity for your own like system or like when you think you have clarity. On understanding womanhood and understanding your mother's perspective or view of how womanhood is, I really want to explore a quote said by Bonnie Burstow, a radical feminist, and it goes like this. Often, father and daughter look down on mother, woman, together. They exchange meaningful glances when she misses a point. They agree she's not as bright as they are, cannot reason as they do. This collusion does not save the daughter from the mother's faith. And this exact quote here, I really want to discuss it because I think the idea sometimes of being afraid of womanhood or trying to differentiate yourself from womanhood is that you will not go through your mother's faith. If I can find the Substack article, I read this a while back and oh gosh, I cannot remember the name, but it was something like, "Oh, I love my mother, but I cannot repeat her life." And when I said I felt so seen by that article, I will like put like a picture up when I find it because it was a really good read. I read this back in February, it's April now, but it was a really good read and it really just I think sometimes we fear becoming our mothers, so we try and alienate ourselves and think ourselves of as other. But our mother was also a girl once in that instance, and I think it's this sort of Electra complex. Actually, no, I don't want to quote Freud. The guy's weird. I'm not quoting Freud. Sorry. But in the instance of we think that alienation will save us from this enslavement of woman and girl in patriarchy when it does not. If we refuse to acknowledge women or try and see through how a mother end up in this position or perspective in which we think mockery will save us, like I'm different from other girls will save us, we kind of sort of end up replicating the same instances because we never learn from it. And it feels as though shoot, I forgot her name, but it I really want to reference the book The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's house. Yes. I cannot remember who wrote this. Gosh, it's not coming to my head. This is so bad. But in the book, she references this type of scenario really, really well. And I think it's a great read. But in The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, it really just talks about how the issues we have within capitalism and patriarchy, we try and use the things that the system has created to try and dismantle those things by alienating ourselves by the system, being like, I'm not like other girls, I'm not like my mother, I'm not going to be replicated in the system of serving a man endlessly. But in this alienation and lack of empathy of that person, we kind of replicate the same thing in which we alienate that idea of womanhood and look down on it like I could never do this thing, you get what I mean? But nobody is above that kind of enslavement essentially. And it's really important to have empathy because then you have a lot more understanding as to how someone can end up in that position, if that makes sense as well. But I think what I really want to summarize in this point there is that I feel as though the way the patriarchal system works and where I feel like there is lack of sometimes advancement, and this is also mentioned in the master's tools whenever dismantle the master's house. I swear I remember her name by the end of this video and it's gonna piss me off. But in understanding that the system basically, I'm reading from my notes, is daughters are taught to distance themselves from their mothers, but inevitably inherit their conditions. In this instance, womanhood is not just suffering, but it's inherited suffering. And I think that scares a lot of us, and it should. It should terrify us, in fact, because why am I willingly taking the burden of suffering from mother to daughter and replicating it if I have my own children? I also want to talk about womanhood as a performance in which the roles we play in womanhood as daughter, sister, mother, wife, other kind of take over self, and the amount of roles we play, there's no role left for us to just be ourselves. Sorry, I'm just editing the footage now, and I really want to bring a good point made by creator called Charlie Toolbox. She's on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know if she has YouTube, but she makes a really good point in Toni Morrison's book called Sula, in which Sula is dying, and they'll ask her if she's lonely, but she says this lonely is mine, and she talks about this idea of a second-hand self, and I really want to link into the idea of womanhood and self essentially, in the instance that even when Sula is essentially suffering, everything she does must be in orbit and in perspective or linked to a man rather than just herself. And I really want to reference Goffman's dramaturgical approach. And this is an unlikely link, but I just thought it was a cool link referencing looking back in my time when I was studying sociology. But essentially, Goffman says we are all actors on a stage essentially, and the social interactions we perform are basically in a way to kind of appease society. And I think womanhood does that really well in appeasing patriarchal society. But what are we performing for, we ask? It really depends on a sociological concept. In Nigeria, a lot of the socialization of women is motherhood. So you're kind of, especially in Christian or extremely religious environments, you're kind of told that you're not a true one until you give birth, and given birth biologically. So that's why I think it's in Nigeria especially, this is a really interesting thing that I've just been understanding more and more. The idea of like a C-section is frowned upon because you're not a proper woman if you have not given birth through proper pain. Mind you, C-section is probably a similar enough pain instance. You're risking your life regardless anyway, because like I see when you give birth, everything I know about pregnancy from TikTok, it just gives that birth is like this walk towards death, kind of like you're nearly at death's door, but you don't die if you're lucky in the instance. And as a black woman, you have to be like, it seems like a thing of luck not to die in childbirth. But going back into the roles that women play in society, in Nigeria specifically, it seems as though, especially in just context, you're not a proper woman if you haven't given birth and given birth naturally. So no C-section, nothing like that, or you do not have a child that calls your name in your hand. And it's really interesting 'cause I think a lot of us have admonished womanhood in understanding Western feminist ideas in that instance. Because like, what if I don't want to be a mother? But what if all your life you've sort of been a mother as like an older sister as well? Like the role you've played that role for so long, it's tiring, exhausting. What if I just want to be myself for myself and I want to be selfish? And I think the idea of this video was I refuse to be a selfless woman. And in that type of role, in that instance, I think as a child, I used to replicate this as well. Like, you'd have like teddy bears or like dollies, and you kind of breastfeed them because that's what you saw the woman in your neighborhood doing. As someone who grew up in Nigeria, lived in Nigeria for a bit, in like the was it late 2000s, so 2005 onwards, yeah, slash early 2010s. But you kind of want to, you do as an act of defiance that you deny womanhood because you want to have parts of yourself that just belong to you. But I think in that denial, you kind of give in to this patriarchal ideal that, oh, to be a woman is to be subservient and to be mother. And I'm really trying to redefine that and really define that woman isn't always selfless. And this idea of nurturing and motherhood, when a lot of people think of women, they think of women as nurturers. And I think a lot of, I'm going to be so for real, a lot of low-vocal mother-in-laws look for that in terms of daughter-in-laws, that, oh, they want women to nurture their sons and make their sons better people. And it's always about what you can do for other people rather than what you can do for yourself. I do think woman is nurturing, but you shouldn't have to nurture other people all the time and water the harvest and feed them. I think you should be able to nurture yourself as well. Actually, nurture yourself first. And I think I really do refuse to be the selfless woman because men are not socialized to be the selfless at all. And it's quite frankly, I'm not saying we do not owe community or anyone anything, because I think women are the best type of community ever. But I do think it is important to prioritize the self at times, because you will become resentful and angry, and in a way that you kind of admonish other young women because you didn't have the experience of girlhood into womanhood, because you didn't choose yourself in when you had the chance to. But I don't think you ever really lose the chance to. You always have the chance to choose yourself, and you think, oh, it's too late, I'm like over 30, I'm like over 40. You always have the chance to choose self, essentially. And something I've been really looking into, which I think I'll talk in a different video, is about self-development. And a lot of men go through this idea of self-development when they enter manhood, and they realize, oh, to be a good man, to be a great man, I need to be selfless and care for other people in my community. Whereas women, girls, teenage girls have been taught that their whole lives. So are you trying to give up more of yourself to be a better person? I think the betterness of women should go the other way, in the sense that you should be taught to prioritize self. All you do for so long is take care of your family, your brothers. You're told that when you go old, you're gonna get married and take care of your husband, your kids. Who's taking care of you? And when do you ever get to prioritize yourself? So I definitely think that's a interesting instance in the roles and performances we play over the idea of self. The other thing I really want to explore is this idea of time and urgency for the identity of womanhood. We're kind of rushed through the identity of girl and teenagehood and lack of responsibility, and then we're kind of just told you have to be a really responsible woman or adult. And the way in which we're socialized as girls as well makes us more responsible from an early age. Like, we're a lot more responsible than the boys who are also our age, sort of. And I really want to reference this Yoruba saying that I often hear a lot of aunties say. I've heard it a lot. I keep hearing it a lot, which is Ile Obin. ile obìnrin kò kí ń pẹ́ ṣú, which means essentially a woman doesn't have the luxury of time or that the sun sets quicker for a woman. And I when I was a kid, I can't lie, the whole thing confused me because I've always been able to understand Yoruba, but when they were saying it, I was like, I look at the sun, I'm like, I don't get why do I have less time than my relatives do? As an adult, I kind of understand that shit's patriarchal as fuck. I do get that now. But as a kid, it was very, very confusing. I was very angry and vexed that the way in which I was socialized was sort of a little bit different from my relatives. I think I've had the less extreme instance of this because my family, in the instance of how socialized in Nigeria, everyone has to like cook, everyone has to do this, everyone has to do chores, like both boys and girls. But in the instance of like when people would talk about like when you would have children and marriage, you're kind of taught as a woman that you have like your 20s into your 30s to kind of sort your life out, like get a degree, because no man wants to marry a dumb woman, but you getting the degrees. For you getting the degree is to get a suitable husband because, like I said, no man wants to marry a dumb woman. And then after that, you have to get married in your mid 20s slash late 20s. You can't do it too early because it's frowned upon, but you can't do it too late either because then you look like old goods. And then after that, when you get married, you kind of want to have your first child in the first year, or people will speak or people will talk because why can't you have children? And then after you have the first child, you want to have multiple children after that because you want to space out really well. So then that one can, it becomes, guy, I can't lie, I've had to zone this shit out like multiple times. There's other, it's really funny to me like now because I don't take this thing very seriously, but I do know people that take this stuff as gospel. Like it is astounding. But like I said, there's this idea of time and urgency in being a woman, and you have to kind of just do stuff because you don't really have the grace or luxury of time. I completely disagree, especially on the child instance, because a lot of that you see a lot of women now, obviously in this feminist revolution we're having again. Is this third wave of feminism or fourth wave? I can't remember what wave we're on, but there's waves. I can't lie. But a lot of women have essentially started freezing their eggs, which I think is cool. I see that because I guess a lot of people still want to have kids. That's a cool concept. I'm sounding like I don't want to have kids. It's for me, kids is like a if it happens, I ain't gonna force it type shit. But in that instance, I think a lot of people, because of like biological research, which is like, oh, women produce less eggs as they enter their 30s and their 40s, and people are worried about not meeting the right person in time. Heterosexual relationships mostly. I see that. I get that. Society is moving weird places. But I also do think, in the instance of research, a lot of people don't look into research and realize male sperm also deteriorates. The quality of the sperm deteriorates, and children are also more likely to have other anomalies as well from male sperm as men age. But you see some people having kids into their 80s. Why? Why? But we have this ageist idea that women shouldn't be having children past their 40s and in their 50s and so on. But yeah, this idea of womanhood and when you can be a woman and when you have set goals is kind of time for you as a woman, whereas men have more of the leniency and the luxury of time. And that's something that I guess used to scare me in terms of aging, which is why I kind of prompted and started thinking about womanhood like this. Because I think a huge part of being terrified of going to my 20s is like, it's going so quickly. Like I was just a kid yesterday. Why can't I enjoy this selfless place in which I'm in uni? Not say selfless place, selfish place when I'm in uni. That I get to really pick myself. I'm picking education. I'm picking like going out, clubbing, seeing people, partying. Like I get to have these selfish instances. I don't think it's selfish, but I guess I mean enjoyment is selfish. But then I'm kind of given like a few years to sort of enjoy this rather than like you can do this for most of your life actually, and it's like you have to get married, you have to do this, you don't have to do anything. But I guess context, social social context wise, it does feel like that, and that terrified me, in which I didn't want to turn these milestone ages. But as I've turned these milestone ages, I'm not saying that my clarity has come from age. I think it's more experience than age, but being able to grow older and become a woman is a blessing. And it's only when you choose to redefine womanhood and take the definitions, you basically have to reclaim the idea of what your type of woman would be. And as much as I love my mother, I refuse to, like I said, that subject out to her, I refuse to repeat her own life. And I have so much love and adoration for her, but I can't do that. It's not happening. And I think this links into my next point, which is in womanhood, love, violence, and endurance are sort of a constant cycle, especially in African womanhood, or I guess the idea of endurance and suffering. Like Record talks about, do we become women when we first feel pain or when we first acknowledge the pain? And I think that's really interesting. As someone who grew up in an abusive household in which my father was quite violent, I do think it is an interesting perspective to think about, because you have, I guess, the social context of, oh, you must endure for like a complete family, all of that. Obviously my mom didn't do that, thank God. Love that laid down. But like there are just things in which the idea of women and the way we've been socialized has been taught, where men will be taught to just kind of be brave and fight back, where women is to endure that suffering and bleed endlessly in silence, essentially. And I do think about it in the same way, like when we do our periods as well. Like so much of periods and the amount of women that go through period pain every month, I'm blessed enough that I don't really have severe cramps like that. But even in the quote blessed enough, because there is really not enough research into, I guess, women's periods whatsoever. There still isn't. And we're flipping 2026. It's crazy. But the idea that women's periods, oh, it's okay if you're in terrible cramps that kind of disable you or leave you kind of not able to move and leave you paralyzed in pain. That's quite normal. Actually, have a birth control pill. Even though birth control pill can kind of make you exacerbate your symptoms eventually. It's like a putting like a plaster on like a bleeding like stab wound essentially, and you're kind of told you kind of have to deal with this in silence, like shh, don't really talk about it, don't talk about your pain with periods. And I think that kind of reflects most other instances of womanhood as well, including domestic violence and abuse and suffering in the hands of love. And you're taught, oh, but if you endure love, do enough. There's this really crazy point that I really want to reference as well. I was watching this cruise video. Cruise is like a Nigerian channel. They do like kind of debates as well. And it must have been one of those debates. And then you have this African auntie where she's like, he hits me. He hits me because he loves me. I said, wrap it up. Wrap it up. But that is what young girls are being socialized to think as well. The African feminist kind of has to be radical, because there's no way not to be so radical, because the way we're socialized is low-key, it's low-key crazy. But I also wanted to talk about Bell Hooks, and I really want to quote her actually. Let me find the quote in my notes. Think of this as like, you know, when you're calling the GP and it's like they have like a ringtone, you're calling like the guys. Give me a second, I'll find the quote. Found the quote. All too often, women believe it is a sign of commitment, an expression of love to endure in kindness or cruelty, to forgive and forget. I say fuck that. I completely reject that. As a woman, when you're taught to endure, you're kind of taught to bleed endlessly in silence in that instance. I completely reject that. I think in a world that kind of shouts and screams that we should endure, and that a little bit of abuse and a little bit of push and shove, just a little bit, even though they don't tell you how much, a little bit, and it's basically just any abuse is just wrong. I reject that inheritance. I refuse to reject the inheritance. My mother, my grandmother, I just refuse to reject it. I don't. And being a woman right now, we have so much more choice and so much more privilege in the instance of choice. And I really want to emphasize on the idea of choice. And it feels as though in the roles we perform that, oh, to be deserving of a love relationships and to be in love relationships with both men and women, because this idea of violence isn't limited to heterosexual relationships, is to give up choice or to lose ourselves in an instant. And loss of self makes for great love. I think the best type of love is to have the identity of self as well. And I see that as well with womanhood, which is why I want to link into my final point, in which I think in redefining womanhood for myself, I felt a lot safer in aging. And I'm really excited to turn 21 soon, so we're P. But I do want to say that perhaps womanhood isn't a loss of self, but becoming self. And like I spoke earlier, there is this instance of growing pains. Like when you're a child, you go through teething and your teeth hurt, and it hurts. It really just hurts. It's irritating. And I do not remember this, but I have like obviously younger relatives, and like I see them when they're going through it. It does look painful. It does look painful. But I think in that instance of growing pains, I think womanhood is also another instance of growing pains, in the instance that when you're becoming something new or becoming more sure of yourself and you're becoming into a place of clarity, I forgot what part of the brain is your frontal lobe. That thing doesn't develop until you're fully 25. You've got like so much time, even though the idea of womanhood and girlhood and selfhood, you can become woman whenever you choose to be a woman. Like you could be a 27-year-old teenager. People think people are joking about that. No, they're not. What makes you think I can't be a teenager? The hell? But in terms of choosing self and choosing then for yourself, I think womanhood can become this moment of clarity and it should be this moment of clarity rather than this moment in which I have completely lost myself. Everything I've built up over the last like 20 years, I've now lost it because I'm becoming a woman. And to satiate and to be rewarded by a romantic relationship, I kind of need to lose myself in the first place to do that. I say, fuck no. I reject that. And I think we should all reject that too. I think womanhood is essentially losing self but returning to self. And I really want to talk about this ID generation of womanhood and the things I've learned from my grandmother, my mother, and they're beautiful, beautiful lessons. I think so often we see womanhood as a negative connotation, but I've seen so much good like in womanhood, like the nurturing I felt from my mother, my grandmother, and the amount of selflessness in the community. I feel as though that selflessness should be poured back into other women, and by pouring back, by not playing a role but being your true self when you're delivering this selflessness, you're kind of giving from an endless well instead of like a place where you're performing because you don't really believe what you're doing in the first place. And it's like, well, but if I do this I'm kind of rewarded. No, by performing, this idea of performance must end, and just being yourself is definitely much more easier to do rather than wearing a mask or remembering the script or lines you've been taught by patriarchy or capitalism in which you're supposed to serve men and just serve endlessly without receiving anything back. I think womanhood and the way we nurture should be reciprocal. We give to community give back to us. It is uncomfortable at times. I will not say that there isn't discomfort in womanhood, but the discomfort shouldn't feel like you're being stifled all the time. It should be a temporary thing where it's like, yes, it happens, sometimes it doesn't happen, but womanhood should feel like breathing, like easy enough to breathe through, if that makes sense. I do think that is the end of the video. And thank you for watching and staying for this long. If you stayed for this long, I don't know how long I've been waffling for, so please. But if you did, like, what is your idea of womanhood? Please comment down in the comment section. Please, I really want to hear other people's perspectives on this because obviously I'm an only child. It gets pretty lonely. I feel like is it Anna in the Frozen franchise where she's like knocking on Elsa's door? We never see you anymore. I started talking to the pictures on the wall. But essentially that. But if you did like this video, please share to other people you think would it would be helpful to. And I'm trying to get a conversation going. I also have Substack, and the Substack that this video is based on is what is womanhood if not lack of self. I'll put the link for that in the caption description below. But thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and have a good week. But yeah, have a good April. I'm turning 21 soon, so I'm kind of jolly.